Labrīt, cienījamie klātesošie un skatītāji tiešsaistē. Priecājos redzēt Bezdūmu nozares asociācijas rīkotajā ikgadējā, jau 5. seminārā. Mani sauc Marita Jansone, un turpmākās pāris stundas būšu kopā ar jums un vadīšu šo pasākumu. Jautājums par smēķēšanas kaitējumu mazinājumu, par jaunām alternatīvām un nākotni bez tabakas dūmiem ir ļoti aktuāls. Kas notiek Latvijā, kāda ir situācija Latvijā un kas notiek citās valstīs, kādi ir panākumi šajā jomā un kādi izaicinājumi. Par to runāsim šodien. Mūsu viesi ir zinoši savas jomas speciālisti, eksperti, un tādēļ lūkšu visus izmantot šo iespēju un aktīvi uzdot jautājumus pēc prezentācijām. Savukārt tie, kas mūs vēro tiešsaistē, sūtiet jautājumus Facebookā. Un prezentācijas būs latviešu un angļu valodā, tātad jautājuma atbildes pēc katras prezentācijas. Tas arī īsumā viss par organizatorisko pusi. Un tagad, kā pirmam runātājam, vārdu vēlos dot Arnim Kaktiņam, tirgus un sabiedriskās domas izpētes centra SKDS direktoram vārdu, kurš mūs iepazīstinās ar jaunāko pētījumu par tabakas un nikotīnu saturošu produktu lietošanu. Tātad, kas notiek Latvijā?
Sveicināti, sveicināti. Prieks šeit būt un atkal padalīties jau ar interesantiem aptauju datiem. Respektīvi, šī gada janvārī taisījām atkal kārtīgu aptauju, bet šajā aptaujā mums fokus uz tā teikt grauda bija ņemta tabakas patēriņš, nikotīna patēriņš, varam lietot šo vārdu, smēķēšana un ar to saistīti aspekti. Kas varbūt būtiski ir, diemžēl, es te varbūt tiem, kas ir zālē, tie redzēs, te mazliet lāzeru spīdināšu, saprot, tie, kas ir attālināti, tie to tā īsti neredzēs, bet, cerams, ka viņi spēs to manu runu savilkt kopā tām bildēm, ko es rādīšu. Mēs kopumā uz graudu ņēmām 2000 respondentu. Metode bija internets, bet 2000, kāpēc, lai mēs varētu iespēju robežās dabūt, izfiltrēt tādas šaurākas, specifiskākas mērķu grupas. Jo mēs zinām to, ka smēķēšana, tabakas, nikotīna patēriņš Latvijā ir diezgan izplatīts, bet tomēr ir tā, ka lielākā daļa jau to tā nedara. Lūk, izskatās, ka plus mīnus veiksmīgi mums tā izdevās. Un pirmā lieta, cik daudz kopumā mums Latvijā varētu būt tabakas un vai nikotīna saturošu produktu lietotāji. Šī tagad ļoti svarīga nianses, jo vecos laikos, atceros arī aptaujās, mēs sakam smēķētāji, smēķēšana vai jūs smēķējat. Tagad jau labu laiku īstenībā šī valoda pati vairs neapzīmē visu laukumu, jo tāpēc, ka tirgu ir parādījušies daudz jauni produkti, kas īsti vairs nav smēķēšana, viņi vairs īsti nav saistīti ar dūmiem, bet viņi saistīti ar nikotīnu un nikotīnu uzņemšanu. Un tāpēc mēs sakam, vai jūs lietojat tabaku un vai nikotīnu saturošus produktus. Citiem vārdiem šeit nav vairs šis vārds smēķēšana. Nozīmē, šeit iekšā mums ir gan tie, kas ir smēķētāji, gan kuri nikotīnu uzņem kādos citos veidos. Ko mēs šeit redzam? Mēs redzam, ka apmēram trešā daļa, jeb 35% mums teica, ka jā, viņi lieto šādus produktus, 2/3 saka, ka nelieto. Turklāt, apmēram katrs ceturtais ir tas, kas saka, ka viņš regulāri lieto, plus 11%, apmēram katrs 10. saka, vispār jā, bet atsevišķās reizēs. Citiem vārdiem, acīm redzot, tie nav cilvēki, kam ir kaut kādas atkarības, kaut kas tam līdzīgi, es teiktu, tādas svētdienas braucēji. Interesanti arī tā nelietotāja daļa. Mēs redzam, ka 36%, mazliet vairāk kā katrs trešais mums teica, ka nekad nav lietojuši, un tad ļoti daudz, 29%, gandrīz katrs trešais saka, ka vispār kaut kad agrāk ir lietojuši, bet tagad vairs nelieto. Man patīk domāt, tur ir kaut kāda daļa, kam varbūt arī bija kaut kādas atkarības, bet kur ar to ir tikuši galā, kur ir veiksmīgi atmetuši. Un es teiktu, tas procents patiesībā ir ļoti, ļoti liels. Ejam tālāk. Ja mēs ņemam uz grauda tos, kuri teica, ka viņi lieto tabaku un vai nikotīnu saturošus produktus, mēs prasījām, cik bieži viņi lieto, dažādus produktu veidus. Mums bija skala tam biežumam, ko redzēsim nākošajā bildē, bet šeit zilā krāsa, zilie stabiņi mums rāda, kas kopumā ir tie, kas ir lietotāji, kas lieto vienu vai otru vai trešo šo te produktu veidu, neatkarīgi no lietošanas biežuma. Nu, citiem vārdiem mēs mazliet te tā ātri varam redzēt, kāds mums Latvijā izskatās tabakas un vai nikotīna saturošu produktu tirgus. Nu, un kā redzams, tad, protams, nav pārsteigums. Pirmajā vietā pārliecinoši tās ir vecās, labās, sen esošās, visiem labi pazīstamās cigaretes, respektīvi no visiem tiem, kas lietotāji, 72%, tas gandrīz 3/4 saka, ka viņi vairāk vai mazāk regulāri, bet mēdz, ar cigaretēm varam lietot vārdu uzsmēķēt. Redzam, ka otrā vietā, un es teiktu, tas ir diezgan liels cipars, 38% no tiem, kas principā lieto kategoriju, saka, ka viņi vairāk vai mazāk lieto e-cigaretes. Nu, redzam, ka ir ar kaut kā diezgan līdzīgi procenti mums karsējumā tabaka, kas populārākais brēns ir Ikos. Mēs redzam, ka ir smēķējumā tabaka, uzticamās cigaretes 15%, cigareles, cigāri, bet, labi, tie tādi ļoti specifiski lietas, ko parasti jau regulāri nelieto, arī ir pa 13%. Nu, ir arī beztabakas nikotīnas pilventiņi, tie 3% no visiem saka, ka vairāk vai mazāk, bet dažkārt mēdz, tad mēs zinām, tirgoja daudz, kas tur vēl paliek 3% kaut kam citam. Nu, šie ir tie paši dati, tikai tie zilais stabiņš jau ir sadalīts mums smalkākās krāsās, kur redzams ir lietošanas biežums. Un šis man šķiet ļoti, ļoti interesants, jo redzams, ka ir kaut kādas kategorijas kā cigaretes, kas ir lietotāji, tad viņi reizi dienā vai biežāk. Absolūti lielākā daļa to dara, un tie, kas saka, ka tur tā, ka vispār jau jā, bet retākā reizi mēnesī vai apmēram reizi mēnesī, tur tie 5–8%, tā teikt, ir arī tādi, bet tas ir mazākums no cigarešu lietotājiem. Bet ja mēs skatāmies, piemēram, e-cigaretes vai ja mēs skatāmies karsējumo tabaku, tur, kā redzat uz krāsām, tas musturs jau parādās savādāks, respektīvi tur tādi, kas ir tādi ļoti bieži, regulāri lietotāji, tā teikt, reizi dienā vai vairāk, kas ar to dzīvo, lielā mērā, patiesībā tā ir, mazākā daļa. Lielākā daļa ir tāda, kas šos produktus lieto no reizes uz reizi, kur, piemēram, ja ņemam tās pašas e-cigaretes, tādu 12%. Šajā stabiņā ir tādi, kas saka, vispār jau lietoja, bet retāk nekā reizi mēnesī. Vai plus 9% saka, vismaz reizi mēnesī, kas varētu būt tā, ka vairākas reizes mēnesī. Saliekam kopā, dabūnam kaut kāds 20%. Lūk, vēlreiz tā bāzi tie visi, kuri lieto tabaku un vai nikotīnu saturošus produktus. Citiem vārdiem, tas, ko es šeit redzu, ka parastās cigaretes, viņas no tādas lietošanas intensitātes viedokļa, tā acīm redzami krīt ārā no šo te pārējo produktu konteksta. Tā, ejam tālāk, es pārlecu pāri. Nākošais sarežģītais grafiks, kur tie, kas vēro tiešraidē, būtu labāk, ja viņi būtu iespēja man kaut kā peli šeit rādīt un uz atsevišķām lietām, bet es ceru, ka jums te izdodās izlasīt tos leibuļus, aprakstus un saprast, kas ir redzams bildē. Respektīvi, mēs jautājām, kur jūs iegādājaties attiecīgos šos uz vertikālās asas redzamos dažādus tabakus un vai nikotīnu saturošos produktus. Un pirmais te, kur tie tumši zilie stabiņi, tā ir mūsu vispārējā mazumtirdzniecība Latvijā. Tas ir parastie veikali, kioski, degvielas uzpildes stacijas, kur visu ko pārdot. Tur krosānus un bulkas un kas tik tur plāksteri un kas tik tur nemēdz būt šampūna matu mazgāšanai un citu starpā arī tabaku nikotīnu saturiešu produktu. Un nākošie mazliet gaišāk zilie ir specializētie veikali Latvijā. Un kā varat redzēt, tad patiesībā pa visām šīm te kategorijām, šie divi izplatīšanas kanāli, tie ir galvenie, pirmie, dominējošie, bet ir būtisks nianses. Kur, piemēram, ja skatāmies cigaretes, tad tie 94%, kas saka, ka viņi to pērk parastajā mazumtirdzniecībā. Tālāk ir cigarillas, cigāri, specifiski produkti, tos varbūt varam neskatīties, bet ja ejam tālāk zemāk, tad, piemēram, e-cigaretes, tad tie tikai 58%, kas saka, ka viņi to pērk vispārējā mazumtirdzniecībā, un puse ir tādi, kas saka, ka to pērk specializētajos veikalos. Vērš uzmanību, ka tie procenti interesanti, viņi vairāk kā 100, jo tāpēc, ka viens cilvēks jau var pirkt gan tur, gan arī pasūtīt internetā, kas ir redzams tur tālāk tajos mazajos procentos. Tālāk, interesants man šķiet, pērk no draugiem paziņām. Tas ir no augšas 4. zilais. Tie procenti nav lieli. Mēs redzam viņu šeit visā spektrā, bet man viņš šķiet tāda ļoti interesanti, jo jautājums, kāpēc vajag pirkt no draugiem paziņām, vai gadījumā tur runa neiet par kaut kādām tur ēnu ekonomikām un kaut kādām tādām interesantām, dīvainām lietām, kur ir tirzniecība no rokas. Un redzam, ka ir, kā redzat, tas ir visā spektrā. Un tāda ir zaļo krāsu ir izcelti internetveikali. Pirmais ir internetveikali Latvijā. Mēs redzam, šur tur kaut kādi procentiņi ir, un arī internetveikali ārvalstīs. Kur, labi, te nav daudz respondentu, 20 gabali, kuri bija beztabakas nikotīnas pilventiņu tirgotāji, tā var būt arī sagadīšanās, te milzīga statiskā kļūda, bet, šeit tie zaļie stabiņi ir visgarākie, kad tiem nikotīnas pilventiņu lietotājiem, tie ir tā kā internetveikali. Starp citu arī e-cigaretēm, kā redzat, internetveikali ir virs vidējā. Lūk, tādi cipari saistībā ar kanāliem. Kādi bija iemesli, kāpēc tie respondenti, kuri lieto e-cigaretes, karsējumu tabaku vai beztabakas nikotīnas pilventiņus, tas ir šos jaunos produktus. Kas ir tie iemesli, kāpēc viņi to ir sākuši darīt? Un šis man šķiet ļoti interesants tops, un tas, kas ir redzams, kas tā galvenā centrālā lieta, tas ir atsevišķa šo produktu īpašības, angliski tas maģiskais vārds features, raksturu lielumi. Respektīvi, tā ir apmēram puse, kas saka, ka šie produkti nedūmo, to lietošanas nesmirda elpa, rokas drēbes, un ar to ir ļoti cieši saistīts nākošais, un šis man šķiet ļoti simpātisks. Šie produkti mazāk traucē apkārtējiem. Citiem vārdiem, ka mēs domājam par citiem cilvēkiem. Ja tas pirmais ir tāds varbūt pa sevīm, bet ne tikai varbūt pa sevīm, ja? Tad tas otrais ir ļoti labs, tā teikt, mums rūp arī, ko domā, kā jūtās citi. Tālāk, apmēram pusē saka, ka šos produktus var lietot iekštelpās, respektīvi, ka tur nav tik daudz to ierobežojumu pēc viss spriežot. Ir, kas saka, ka grib izmēģināt ko jaunu, 39%, un tālāk nāk interesanti cipari. Respektīvi, 39%, es teiktu, ļoti daudz. Viņi saka, ka viņi sākuši lietot šos jaunos, lai samazinātu tradicionālo cigarešu vai citu klasisko tabakas produktu smēķēšanu. 39%. Tas ir liels cipars. Un apmēram katrs trešais 34% saka, jo tas ir mazāk kaitīgi nekā tradicionālās cigaretes vai citi klasiskie tabakas produkti. Citiem vārdiem nav vairākums, bet es teiktu, visā kopējā šajā par šo produktu jauno lietotāju masā tie ļoti lieli tomēr procenti. Ejam tālāk, un kādi tad tabaku un vai nikotīnu saturošie produkti bija pirmie, kurus tie, kuri šobrīd lieto šādu veidu produktus, ir sākuši lietot. Un te mēs redzam, ka ļoti viennozīmīgi tās ir tradicionālās cigaretes. Ja mēs kopumā ņemam visu to, kas šajā topā savalkam kopā, un tas ir redzams te tajā grafikā, kur tie divi stabiņi, tad 9 no 10, 91% saka, ka viņš patiesībā ir sācis šo produktu, nikotīnu saturošo produktu lietošanu ar tradicionāliem tabaks produktiem, un tikai apmēram 7% ir tādi, kuri norādījuši uz jaunajiem tabaks produktiem. Un, ja paskatāmies tos jaunos tabaks produktus, tad, biežāk tās ir e-cigaretes. Tas ir elektroniskās cigaretes, salti, veipi, apmēram 5% no visiem tiem, kuri šobrīd lietoja, saka, ka viņi sākuši ar šādiem produktiem. Ja skatāmies karsējumu tabaku ikosus, tad tas ir tikai 1%. Citiem vārdiem, līdz šim vismaz absolūti lielākā daļa sāk ar tradicionālajiem produktiem, un pamatā tās ir tradicionālās cigaretes. Interesanta lieta, vai tie, kuri lieto šos nikotīnu saturošos produktus un šeit svarīgi uzskata sevi par smēķētājiem, jo tas, kā mēs iepriekš redzējām, daudz ir tādu svētdienas braucēji, dažkārt, redzot kaut kāds tusiņš, kaut kas kompānija, tur kaut kur mazlietiņ, jā, bet cilvēks neuzskata sevi par smēķētāju vai šādu produktu lietotāju, un varbūt arī objektīvi, kāpēc, lai mēs viņu pa tādu sauktu, ja vienreiz gadā kopā ar draugiem tur kaut ko tur mēģināja mazlietiņ niekoties. Bet šo mēs jautājam tiem, kuri sevi uzskata par smēķētājiem. Tad vai jūs vēlaties atmest smēķēšanu? Un cipari ir interesanti, jo, kā varat redzēt, 2/3 saka vairāk, mazāk, stiprāk, vājāk, bet jā. Turklāt 22%, un tas, teiktu, ir daudz, tas ir apmēram katrs 5. Tiecās uz katru 5. saka cieti, noteikti jā, plus 44% saka drīzāk jā. Kas nozīmē, ka cilvēki apzinās, varbūt, ka tas nav labi, nav veselīgi, ka kaut kā būtu labāk bez tā. Otro svaru kausos mums ir apmēram katrs 3. 20% saka nē, drīzāk nē, noteikti nē. Tās atbildes nozīmē, ka viņi par šo lietu ir domājuši, viņi priekš sevīm to ir noskaidrojuši, ka viņa atbildi nē, plus 10% saka, nezinu, nav par to domājuši. Es to skaitītu pie nē. To dari, un es par to domāju, es, redzot, to turpinās darīt. Bet, redzam, ka lielākā daļa, vairāk vai mazāk, jau tā kā gribētu atmest. Lūk, un tad tiem, kuri sevi uzskata par smēķētājiem un vēlētos atmest tām 2/3, mēs prasījām, vai jūs kādreiz esat jau mēģinājis to darīt. Un te mēs redzam, ka jā, absolūti lielākā daļa to ir mēģinājuši. Turklāt 27% saka, jā, mēģināju, centos, bet kaut kā tas neizdevās vispār tikt nost. Vairāk kā puse saka, jā, izdevās, bet pēc tam kaut kādu iemeslu dēļ, diemžēl, es atkritu atpakaļ un atkal atsāku smēķēt. Mazākā daļa no tiem, kas tā kā vēlētos, saka, kad līdz šim nav paprovējuši, kā tur varētu būt, vai varētu vai nevarētu izdoties. Un tad tiem, kuri tā kā vēlētos, un kuri tas nav izdevies vai nav mēģinājuši, mēs prasījām, kāpēc, tad, kas tad traucēja, kāpēc tad jums tur tā jūs tā kā gribētu, bet tikt nost, bet vēl aizvien to darāt. Tad tā bilde ir šāda. Visbiežāk cilvēki saka, ka norāda paši uz sevīm kaut kā, kad, gribas spēks, ja es varētu to gribas muskuli kaut kā stingrāk savilkt, tad varbūt man izdotos tikt nost. Bet, kā redzat, ir arī procenti citām pozīcijām, kur katrs 3. 37% saka, ka nespēja izturēt ar smēķēšanas pārtraukšanu saistītos apgrūtinājumus, kas saistīta ar fizisko vai emocionālo pieradumu, tā teikt, bija grūti fiziski. 37% saka, ka jā, grūti samazināt stresu, arī norāda uz tiem atkarības aspektiem. Ir arī citas lietas, kas ir mazliet retāk minētas, bet jā, griba un tas, ka tomēr šie piereduma aspekti mums lien ārā. Un ko tie, kas uzskata par smēķētājiem un vēlētos atmest un kuriem tas nav izdevies, ir darījuši? Lai atmestu smēķēšanu, kādas tad ir bijušas tās viņu pieejas, taktikas, tad, kā redzat, lielākā daļa, nevar teikt lielākā daļa, bet lielākais procents, 43% saka, ka viņi centušies pakāpeniski samazināt šos izsmēķēto cigarešu apjomu, bet, ir centušies, bet, šie tie, kuriem tas, finālā nesanāca, neizdevās, tā stratēģija nenostrādāja. 37% saka, ka vienkārši pārstāja smēķēt un tad centās izturēt, bet šie tie, kuriem tas neizdevās. Mēs redzam, ka cilvēki darījuši arī citas lietas. Saka, ka ir lietojuši medikamentus, ir cigarešu vietā sākuši lietot e-cigaretes, un viņiem tas nav izdevies. Bet vēlreiz, šie tiem, kam nav izdevies. Mums aiz kadra, diemžēl, man nav cipari par tiem, kuriem tas ir izdevies. Un mēs zinām, ka ir neviens un daudz, kuriem tas ir izdevies. Redzam, ka ir katrs 10. mēģinājis palielināt fizisko slodzi, 7% cigarešu vietā ir mēģinājuši lietot karsējumu tabaku, ir citi procenti ar mazāku minēšanas biežumu. Un tagad mēs esam tādos pavisam mazos skaitļos, bet atkal šo bildi mēs te ielikām, jo viņš likās ļoti, ļoti interesants. Respektīvi, atkal mums ir tie, kuri lieto šos jaunos kopumā nikotīnu saturošos produktus uzskata sevi par smēķētājiem, viņi vēlētos atmest, bet viņi iepriekš nav izdevies, un kuri cigarešu vietā ir sākuši lietot, respektīvi mēģinājuši pārsvičot, pāriet uz šiem jaunajiem produktiem. Un tie zilie stabiņi saka tos, kuri mēģināja smēķēšanu aizstāt ar e-cigaretēm, zaļie, kuri mēģināja aizstāt ar karsējamo tabaku, un zeltanie tie, kuri mēģināja pāriet uz beztabakas nikotīnas pilventiņiem. Viņiem, respektīvi, neizdevās. Citi ir tiem, kam izdevās, kam neizdevās. Bet tāpēc viņiem prasījām, ka jūs pārgājāt uz tiem jaunajiem, kā tas ietekmē jūsu pašsajūtu, veselību. Vai jums tā kā likās, ka tas drīzāk tā ietekme ir pozitīva, nebija ietekmes pa vidu vai arī negatīva. Šie nav procenti, tie ir absolūtie skaitļi, respektīvi, cik mums bija tādi respondenti, jo kopumā tur tās bāzes ir mazas. Bet vienalga, jūs tā uz aci uzmetat, tad, kā redzat, ir tādi, kas saka, ka viņiem likās, ka tā pāriešana uz jaunajiem produktiem, tā ka viņus negatīvi ietekmē. Bet tas ir absolūts mazākums. Vairāk tādi, kas saka, nē, jā, man neizdevās, bet es jūtu, ka tie jaunie produkti tomēr kaut kā labāk man ietekmē, vai arī viņi saka, es tur nejūtu lielu atšķirību. Citiem vārdiem tas bilance, tas balans, jā, viņš tomēr ir tajā virzienā, ka pat tiem, kuriem neizdevās atmest smēķēšanu, tas būtu arī pāriet uz jaunajiem produktiem, kas atkrīt atpakaļ, jā, viņi tā kā biežāk saka, ka, nē, tas sajūtas, šķietam tā ietekme uz manīm bija drīzāk pozitīva nekā negatīva. Bet, kā redzat, ir arī daži tādi, kas saka, nē, viņi sajūtās sliktāk šiem jauniem produktiem. Tālāk, visbeidzot, pēdējās pāris bildes. Kā tad ir? Un šeit mums ir visa sabiedrība kopumā, gan tie, kas ir smēķētāji, nesmēķētāji, nikotīna produktu lietotāji, nelietotāji. Tad ņemot vērā visu, ko jūs zināt, vai jūs prāt šie alternatīvie bezdūmu nikotīna produkti, tas ir e-cigaretes, karsējumā tabaka un beztabakas nikotīnas pilventiņi, ir vairāk vai mazāk kaitīgi par tradicionālajiem tabakas produktiem, piemēram, tādiem kā parastās vai uztinamās cigaretes. Tas, ko varat redzēt bildē, ir, ka kopumā nav sabiedrībā viennozīmīga attieksme. Tas, jūs redzat, te ir visādas krāsas. Zilā, kas saka, viņiem jau šķiet, ka tas kopumā ir mazāk kaitīgi, 7% saka ievērojami mazāk kaitīgi, 26%, ka tie varētu būt nedaudz mazāk kaitīgi, savalkam kopā dabūna apmēram katru trešo, kas domā, ka vispār tie jaunie ir netik slikti. Ja? Bet tik un tā arī tur lietots vārds, ka tas nav veselīgi. Jā, bet viņi ir mazāk kaitīgi. Diezgan daudzi, dzeltenā krāsa apakšā ir tādi, kas saka, viņiem šķiet, ka viņi ir tādi paši, ka tur īpašas atšķirības nav. Un tad arī daļa, bet kā redzat, tas ir mazākums, apmēram tikai katrs 10. uzskata, ka šie jaunie varētu būt kaitīgāki. Ievērojami kaitīgāki vai mazliet kaitīgāki. Pelēkā krāsa, kā parasti, mums te patīk šajos grafikos izmantot tādi, kas saka, nav mana tēma, pārāk sarežģīti, grūti pateikt, neņemos spriest. Tā kā, redzam neviennozīmīga attieksme, bet tomēr tas balanss ir vairāk tajā virzienā, arī kopumā sabiedrībā, ka šie jaunie produkti tomēr varētu būt mazāk kaitīgi. Un visbeidzot, kā tad arī viss šis tika uzdots visai sabiedrībai, visiem mūsu 2000 respondentiem, kā jūs vērtējat to, ka tradicionālo tabakas produktu smēķētāji, kur pilnībā nespēja atmest smēķēšanu, cenšas pāriet uz alternatīvajiem bezdūmu nikotīna produktiem. Tas ir e-cigaretes, karsējumā tabaka, beztabakas nikotīnas pilventiņu produktiem, kuros nenotiek degšanas process, rodas mazāk kaitīgu ķīmisku vielu un kur nerada pasīvās smēķēšanas risku. Un kā varat redzēt, tad atkal tas vektors, kopumā tie svaru kausi, viņi vairāk nosliecās tajā virzienā, ka tomēr tas būtu labāk nekā tas nebūtu labāk vai pat būtu kaitīgāk. Respektīvi, apmēram katrs trešais. Te kopā gan smēķētāji, nesmēķētāji, gan nikotīna lietotāji, nelietotāji domā, ka vispār jau būtu labāk pāriet uz jaunajiem, pretstatā tikai 11%, kas domā, nē, tas nebūtu labāk, no tā vajag turēties tālāk. Dzeltenās krāsas ir daudz, salīdzinoši daudziem, šķiet, ka, tur nomaini tur vienu pret otru, tad tas pats vien būtu. Bet vēlreiz, sabiedrība sašķelta, bet tomēr tie svaru kausi mums vairāk ir tajā virzienā, ka šie jaunie produkti ir labāki nekā vecie tradicionālie. Kam arī es, teiksim, subjektīvi var teikt, es pats neesmu nelietotājs, nekad neesmu nesmēķējis nekā, bet arī cik tālu mani nācies iedziļināties, ja tad diezgan viennozīmīgi es esmu sapratis, ka tie jaunie, lai kādi viņi nebūtu, viņi ir šķietami mazāk kaitīgi nekā tas ir ar vecajiem, labi zināmajiem produktiem. Nu, lūk, tas īsumā no manas puses ātri izskrienot cauri mūsu aptaujas datiem.
Jā, paldies par detalizēto un saistošo stāstījumu. Vai ir jautājumi zālē sēdošajiem? Jā.
Labdien, jā, Māris Jurušs, RTU pētnieks, jā, paldies par interesanto prezentāciju. Es, varbūt tās arī tāds divas jautājumus, ja var, ja mums laiks, jā. Viens vairāk tāds pa jauniešiem, es varbūt palaidu garām, vai bija arī tajos rezultātos tādas redzamas tendences, tieši šiem te alternatīviem produktiem, jā, ko parasti mēs arī, parasti tā, sabiedrībā valda viedoklis, jā, ka tie ar šiem te alternatīviem produktiem arī īpaši jācīnās, jo rekur taisni tie tur jaunieši vairāk un lieto šos te produktus, vai šīs tendences parādīja, ka tas tā arī ir, ka, teiksim, šajos respondentos tieši jauniešiem ir šī te priekšroka izteiktāka.
Jā, mums pētījumā bija grafika, tad, diemžēl, laika ierobežojumi, tāpēc es nevarēju tur parādīt visu iespējamos griezumus, bet cik tālu es atceros, tad tur bija sakarība, ka, ja mēs ņemam to produktu lietošanu, tad tiešām jauniešiem tie stabiņi bija garāki, jā. Bet te es gribētu no sevis pielikt, kad, tagad, tas, kad, ja to jauno nebūtu, jā, vai no tā automātiski izriet, ka tie jaunieši nesmēķētu, nelietotu neko, un par to es absolūti un galīgi neesmu pārliecināts, jā. Ir ļoti iespējams, ka viņi lietotu vecās labās pēdiņās, liekot tradicionālās cigaretes.
Jā, par to arī bija vairāk tāds otrs jautājums, es mēģināšu arī noformulēt. Jā, jo arī mēs zinām, ka viens no šīm te nodokļa jēga ir šis te būtība primārā ir samazināt kopīgo patēriņu. Tātad mēs cīnāmies ar šo te parādību, lai samazinātu pēc būtības. Jā. Bet praksē mēs redzam, ka šie te jaunie alternatīvie produkti vairāk tā kā strādā kā tāds tā kā, tirgus pārdala, nevis, teiksim, kopīgā samazināšana. Proti tajā jūs slaidā, kur bija arī tā ļoti par šo te jautājumu, kā atmest šo lietošanu kopumā, ļoti labi parādījās arī šis te jautājums, kad respondenti pateica, ka tā gribas spēks ir tas galvenais, un tad bija arī tā, kad jūs minējāt motivāciju, vai jums, teiksim, vai izdevās tā kā saprast, kāda tā respondentu motivācija kopumā, vai tas, teiksim, strādātu, ka, nezinu, šiem te visiem produktiem vēl palielina nodokli, un tad tas, viņiem palīdzētu vispār šo te lietu atmest.
Nē, mums tur nebija citi jautājumi, ja atmiņa neviļa, mēs tur dziļāk neiebraucām tajā teritorijā, bet tas, kas izskanēja jūsu jautājumā, man šķiet tur diezgan izplatīta. Es zinu, ka jūs tur tā esat gudrs cilvēks un tiešām to tā neredzat un nedomājat, bet ir tā sakarība, ka, teiksim, ja uzliks lielāks nodokļus, jo tas skaidrs, ka kaut kā nelietos un te visu atmetīs, bet man šķiet visa cilvēces vēsture, vēl vairāk Latvijas prakse ir pierādījusi, ka tas galīgi un absolūti tas tā nenotiek, jo tāpēc, ka ir taču melnais tirgus, pelēkais tirgus, galā mums ir mūsu atvērtās robežas, dažādās valstīs ir tur visādas tur tarifu un cenu atšķirības. Visbeidzot, ir interneta tirzniecība, kuru tur grib vai negrib, tur ir problemātiski ļoti izkonkurēt. Līdz ar to viedoklis, ka mēs mazajā Latvijā mēs tā teikt, visu apliksim tikai nodokļiem, un tad nodokļi jau šeit visu atrisinās. Man šķiet, tas ir tāds ļoti vienkāršots skats uz dzīvi, kura galīgi nav tāda. Ja.
Paldies. Vai vēl kāds vēlas uzdot jautājumu? Jā.
Es varbūt gribēju pajautāt par pašiem demogrāfiskajiem rādītājiem. Kādas bija tie vecuma sadalījums, sievietes pret vīriešiem, kā jūs
Tur bija proporcionāli. Respektīvi, interneta aptauja, lai ietaupītu laiku, es te vienkārši nerādīju respondentu profilus. Mūsu mērķa grupa bija 18-75 gadi, un tad tā kāds interneta aptaujās notiek, tur pēc, kā mēs gudri sakam, pēc kvotu izlases principiem mēs centāmies uzkonstruēt reprezentatīvu iedzīvotāju kopumu, respektīvi, lai mums pareizās proporcijās ir dzimumi, vīrieši, sievietes, lai mums pareizās proporcijās tur iekšā ir dažādas vecuma grupas, lai mums mums pareizās proporcijās ir latviski, krieviski, nu labi, ne latviski, krieviski runājošie, bet, jo mums ir statistika pa tautībām, respektīvi latvieši un krievi un citas tautības, un lai mums pareizās proporcijās ir reģionālais pārklājums. Respektīvi, pēc šiem 4 parametriem tad ņēmām tos 2000, konstruējām, lai tā teikt, mums ir tā kā Latvijā mēs te visi izskatāmies.
Un tad tā kā par izglītības, piemēram, līmeni vai tā kā ekonomisko statusu, to tā kā neiekļāvāt?
Nē, tas mums nebija kontrolas parametros.
Un vai būs kaut kad arī prezentācija, kur arī jūs izskatiet tos, piemēram, vecuma saistības ar motivāciju, kāpēc sāka vai ko sāka?
Nu, ja kādreiz kāds organizēs kaut ko tādu, tad jau varbūt es varēšu noprezentēt. Jūs varētu teikt, ziniet, es savā kantorī šodien 11. vakarā slēgtām durvīm priekš saviem taisīšu šādu prezentāciju.
Paldies par jautājumiem. Es saprotu, ka ar to mēs arī pirmo daļu beidzam. Liels paldies, Arne, par prezentāciju. Paldies. Nākamā prezentācija būs angļu valodā un uzstāsies Kristofers Fjellners no Zviedrijas vides un sabiedrības veselības institūta. Prezentācijas tēma Zviedrijas pieredze smēķēšanas mazināšanā. Now I would like to welcome our next guest, Christopher Fjellner from Swedish Environment and Public Health Institute. Right. Yep.
Thank you very much. My name is Christopher Fjellner. I'm very happy to be here in Riga today. I'm going to do something that I'm actually pretty uncomfortable with. I got this and it makes me scared because I've had my whole professional life in politics as a politician, which means that when doing this PowerPoint, I called my sister and asked her actually if she could give me some tips and help. She's a management consultant, and she told me that, okay, the only thing, my only competence is actually doing PowerPoints, she told me, and this is one of the, not the first, but one of the first PowerPoints that I will do. So bear with me if I miss a slide or do something wrong there. Because I'm here and will use the PowerPoints to tell you a fantastic story. A fantastic story that is, the best with it is that it's actually true. And that it comes with a message of hope. That there is a possibility for something else. And I would call that, I decided to call it wasn't me, probably someone else before me, the Swedish experience. It could have a subtitle, something like, How Sweden Quit Smoking and Did It Without Regulation, without taxes, and actually without the public outcry and protests among the general public. And if I would actually tell you that, and do it, or maybe I should say something about myself first. I realize that's probably better. Before we go into it, I love when you just dive into the topic and you forget. You're so eager to convey something that you forget to say who you are. As I said, my name is Christopher Fjellner. I'm the managing director of a think tank in Stockholm called Environment and Public Health Institute. We're trying to address the threats of our environment and health today, working for a rational, cost-effective, evidence-based policy. We're totally independent and non-party affiliated, and totally funded by private donors. Our first donor was a foundation called the Free Enterprise Foundation in Sweden. I am, as I said, I have my background. I'm actually still in politics. I'm a member of the executive board of the Conservative Party in Sweden. That happened. It looks as if we won the election last Sunday. Therefore, I was a little bit stressed whether I could actually come here or whether we would be stuck in negotiations. We are in negotiations, but I'm not there in them right now. I have a Zoom meeting after this. But the reason I dove into this question is because I spent 15 years as a member of the European Parliament in the Committee for Environment and Public Health. And I myself actually quit smoking by using oral tobacco. What fascinated me was when I, 26 years old, went down to Brussels and realized I couldn't find any oral tobacco, that it was illegal. I could find cigarettes everywhere, but I couldn't find the oral tobacco that helped me personally to stop smoking. And I felt a little bit as if I was a French guy coming somewhere and finding out that, you know, I could find vodka everywhere, but they banned wine. And that made me pretty upset, which meant that I looked into that topic and started working on it quite extensively in my political career there. But I've stuck to that. It's one of, I didn't spend maybe more than a 0.1% of my time on this topic, but it stuck with me emotionally somehow. And I've kept it going since leaving the European Parliament. I think it was 2 years ago. But if I would tell you the Swedish experience in just one slide, then I could probably leave you with that. I would tell you with this slide, because this is what happened. Snus, oral tobacco, is an old traditional product in Sweden. It was used by the coal miners, the farmers, the labor, and it was big. It was a lot bigger than cigarettes when it started, and cigarettes when it started. But then something happened, and cigarettes took over. But, as you can see, nowadays, people have switched. They're leaving the cigarettes and substituting it with something else. Swedes actually consume almost as much tobacco as the rest of the world and Europe. No big difference there. We just don't have the bad habit of smoking it. You know, oral tobacco, it's not, you know, a part of a healthy diet. It's not carrots. I wouldn't recommend my children to use it, but it's a lot less harmful than smoking. A good principle, never light up anything and inhale it. I think it's the most common reason for death in most of the developed world, that they actually burn wood inside and therefore inhale a lot of dangerous substances. Don't suck on an exhaustion pipe on a car, you will die. Don't inhale. That was Clinton's word. Or maybe he said, I didn't inhale. But how come this happened? Why did Swedes do that? And if I would show you that in one slide to make you understand that, I would probably show you this. Oh, I have animations. 1973, we went from that to that. From being an old traditional ground product, it was actually pretty dirty. You could see, and you can still see, some people use this old stuff. You can see on their fingers if they use it, because they are brown and dirty. They went, some genius engineer, I think it was on Swedish Match actually, decided, let's put it into a pouch. And it became a rather fresh product compared to everything else. And therefore, that's probably the whole explanation. The fascinating thing is, again, it wasn't a public health campaigner that did this, it was an engineer at a company that actually, made an invention and actually changed people's habits. And this change came with a fantastic health effect. As I said, there's a huge difference in health. That is acknowledged. It's nothing, I would say it's nothing that the public health campaigners in Sweden, you know, market. One should, and you know, they should probably market it. Look what we did. But it's still a tobacco product, and it puts some of the discussion about regulation in question, and taxes, and all the money that was spent on campaigns. Maybe it didn't do that much difference. But from time to time, they actually acknowledge that what happened. And I think this is from the ministry, Socialstyrelsen. It's not the ministry, but it's the, more or less, the Department of Public Health, more or less. It's the official government. And they made in their report 2007, they stated the clear fact that snus, the oral tobacco that we used, for every user of snus that starts smoking, there's 4 smokers that switch to snus. And when they stop smoking, which actually has a positive effect on public health, as smoking is so much more damaging to health than snus. That was the official line there. I think that's important. Because it's actually, why care about this? Or let's put it like this. Anybody who cares about public health has to care about this. If you don't do that, then you can't say that you're engaged in the fight against cancer, if you ignore this fact. And to show you that in one slide, I would just like to show you this. tobacco-related cancers among men in Europe. You know, it's a pretty astonishing situation. We, as I said, we consume as much tobacco as the rest of Europe. We're somewhere here in the average, around Estonia, or maybe Latvia, I don't know. Hopefully not Latvia. But you know, we're up there, but we don't die. And if you care about people not dying out of tobacco related, then you have to care about this. I got so, when looking into this, bear with me, I got carried away and looked into different types of cancer even, just to actually, first, you know, the most obvious one that everybody thinks of, don't smoke, you get lung cancer. Of course, lung cancer and all the respiratory. Look at the men. The lowest in the rest of Europe, 21 death rates per 100,000. Sweden, 14. The average, 36. And among men, it's fantastically low. Then people say, oh, but it's in the mouth. You will get cancer in the mouth or the lip. You know what? It's still the lowest in Europe by far. Okay, it's nicotine. You will have stroke, heart attacks, or anything like that. Nope. The average in Europe and among men, lower. There was one study once, and that I see marketed from time to time, saying that, yeah, but you actually have an increased risk of pancreas cancer. There's been discussion about that study, but it might be right. But even if it is right that you have an increased risk, we're still, you know, it's still better compared to the alternative that the rest of Europe, the experiment that the rest of Europe is doing. And all total causes. Now, anybody who looked at these carefully, they saw something strange. You know what? And you see the women. What? How come the women do that? And again, I don't know how long time it takes to develop cancer if you smoke. But it doesn't happen overnight, I'll tell you that. And I can tell you, it wasn't that many women that actually, 10 since 73, said, okay, let's actually do this. And still, women are smoking more than men in Sweden. It's the only country, I think, in the world where women are smoking more than men. It's starting to come to the same rate, and therefore, I'm completely convinced that we will see these figures converge as well over time when we see that those levels. But still, women smoke more than men in Sweden. I had this fantastic moment. I was thinking a little bit about today's seminar yesterday when I picked up the kids from school. The fascinating thing is we walked from school. It takes like 10 minutes. And we saw a woman smoking. And was, you know, I didn't think about it, but the fascinating thing that struck me is my kids thought about it, because it's so uncommon that they felt, you know what, she's smoking there. What? How can she do that? You know, children, how they are. They're very upset that I'm using tobacco at all, and constantly. But smoking, for them, that was something. And then it struck me that I don't remember the last time I saw a man smoking. You know, I do it, but it wasn't. It must have been a week ago or something. The most people I see outside of where we live is women smoking. Still, not a huge difference, but that's my own personal just observation that I did yesterday. I decided, I looked at the statistics just to compare a little bit how people actually smoke in Sweden compared to, and then I choose Germany. And the reason I choose Germany is because you have 23% smokers in Germany, and that's actually the average in the EU as well. And the fascinating thing is that, you know, Germany, it's the kind of the center of gravitas in Europe, and whatever happens and what Germany decides to do others tends to follow. And if you compare Germans, 23, the average of Europe, with Sweden, it's 7%. But I think one of the most interesting things as well, when there's an alternative, is not only that, how much the smokers smoke. 50% of the smokers in Sweden smoke every day. But in Germany, 75% of those who smoke, smoke every day. So it's not only that we have a lot less people smoking, we're really close to tobacco endgame. Among some segments, especially men, young men, we're actually below the WHO 5% tobacco endgame. If it wasn't for the women, we would be there. But the people that still smoke, smoke less. And that's also important, because every cigarette counts. And I also thought it's interesting to look into the figures of who actually smokes, because that matters as well. As I said, Germany is typical. Men smoke, women smoke, but not as much. 27% of the men. Young smoke more than the oldest. And if you look to Sweden, how does it look here? Completely different. 7%. Women smoke more, as I said. Women smoke more. But if you care about the young, here, it's the oldest one. Don't teach an old dog how to sit. That stick to their cigarettes and their habits. But the young have adopted a completely different behavior. So if you care about helping the young and giving them an option, then you have to care about this, actually. I would be worried, I would be more worried with that figure than any other figure. Because habits, when you do habits when you're young, they tend to stick, as we can see. And how did we end up here? Because the fascinating thing is more or less that Sweden is the only country that does this. How come the difference between Sweden and Germany? And how come Sweden is unique? And the answer is, of course, that it's banned in the rest of Europe. 1989, I think it was 1989, might be 1990, it was banned, oral tobacco was banned in the rest of Europe. And I can say that, being still stupid politicians, why the hell did they do that? You know. But I also have to say, bloody industry. Because the reason the politicians did that was that US tobacco and other, they are the ones that I know about, US tobacco, I don't know if they exist anymore, but they're probably merged to something else, tried to launch the American dip, the American oral tobacco, in Scotland and Ireland, and targeted young people. And if you go to get a new tobacco product from a big tobacco company marketing young people, of course politicians react. And you know what? 1989, 1990, Sweden wasn't a member of the European Union. So there was nobody there from Sweden telling them that there actually might be a benefit for it. When Sweden joined the European Union, there were bumper stickers saying, yes to Europe, but not without my oral tobacco. On cars, it was actually an important question in the negotiation, and we have an exemption, which actually made it possible for us to continue that journey. But I lied. I shouldn't lie. Maybe it's because I'm a politician still. Because Sweden isn't the only country. Norway follows more or less exactly the same pattern. Because in Norway it's legal. Because they're not a part of the European Union. And you know, back then, when snus and oral tobacco was banned, the big traditional tobacco companies campaigned in favor of the ban because they saw that snus was a threat to their traditional cigarette industry back then. People who was working with the question back then have told me. Now that's all changed. They know that they're a part of a literally dying business. So therefore, their perspective has changed. But you know what? The future is not about tobacco. The future is white. And it's tobacco-free. This is what's making the biggest difference to actually make women quit smoking in Sweden right now. That you've been able to leave tobacco completely and have a clear nicotine product instead. And the fantastic thing with this is that it's legal. It's not banned by the European Union. Some people are worried about this. I decided back home to actually look at the ingredients of this product. I took Zyn, which I think is a Swedish match product. Personally, I use the BAT Loop. No, Velo, I think it's called, is my personal favorite. But that one is my favorite. But I used Zyn and looked and compared it with Sonic, who also is nicotine pouches, but a nicotine replacement therapy, a medicinal product. And then I also checked with the Nicorette chewing gum that people used to quit, and just compared what it contains. And you know what? Contains more or less the same stuff. It's no big difference. It's not, it's things in these products. It's things that we normally use and buy at pharmacies and use to help people. The big difference is that it's more nicotine in them, which makes them more attractive, and flavors that makes them more attractive. The fascinating thing right now is I pulled some data from, I have a friend that works at Hype Group, and I pulled some data from him on who actually buys, because I think they're the biggest online retailer of nicotine pouches. Who actually, they did a consumer survey, who actually buys nicotine pouches. And you can see 59% are former smokers. 11% are 5% are, I think, okay, the colors get wrong. Regular smokers, and I think 11% are occasional smokers. And 25% are others. Others in this context could mean, I don't have the information, it could very well mean people that actually stop using oral tobacco, snus, and go to nicotine pouches. But it could also, to some extent, be people who haven't used tobacco or nicotine at all. One has to acknowledge in this context. But the most fascinating thing is one question that I found that they actually hadn't highlighted that much, is that they asked these 59%, why did you do that? And only 34% said that they did that actively because they wanted to quit smoking, which means that 66% of this chunk is what we can call accidental quitters. People that, oops, I found this product, I started using it, and I suddenly found myself quitting, which is an interesting thing in itself, I think. But the big question is, of course, will we repeat the mistakes from the past? I said it's legal, but will it keep being legal? And there, as I said, I'm working on a think tank doing policy, and having a background as a politician, I've been thinking a lot of what we should do policy-wise to actually being able not to repeat the mistakes of the past. And the first thing is, of course, keep it legal. Keep it legal. But not only that, that's not enough. I think it's also important to keep it attractive. Because if you don't keep it attractive, if you ban all the flavors or actually make it into something like this, people won't quit. People won't use it. So keep it attractive. Keep it effective. If you put nicotine limits on it, that actually doesn't, that means that, okay, I will use it, but I will also take a cigarette to get the nicotine. Because it's the nicotine we're after. Okay, it's the smoking that kills us, but it's the nicotine we're after. So we have to keep it effective and let people don't have caps that actually makes it impossible. And make it competitive. Don't put, you should put taxes on health from a health perspective. Tax the most dangerous stuff the most, tax the least dangerous stuff the least. And that's the best way to keep it competitive. If you raise taxes too much, make it too expensive, you'll lose the effect. And last but not least, it's a product most people don't even know that it exists. You have to be able to communicate and market it. Again, as with taxes, put the strictest marketing limitations and regulations on the most dangerous stuff, and the least marketing regulation on the least dangerous stuff, to help people voluntarily, without taxes, without regulation, without protests, even accidentally quit smoking. And maybe the most important thing is that industry doesn't screw this up, doesn't repeat the mistakes from the past. I hate when I see sampling events on, at beaches. Try this new fantastic nicotine product. And I see young people standing there, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Or when I see provocative ads. You have to be able to market it, but do it responsibly. Politicians don't ban things because it's fun. They ban things because people get worried. Don't make people worried about it. So therefore, I think it's a lot of important lessons to be learned from politicians, but also for industry, if we're not to repeat the mistakes from the past. And that was all.
Thank you, Christopher. I was carried away by your presentation and just now try to turn back. Any questions, please?
I said it all.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Elina. I have a question about Swedish experience. First, is how and when Swedish government starts to hear about this and the industry about this new products, and how much time it takes, and what kind of activities you use in Sweden to introduce government, and when they start to hear.
I think the product was introduced to the Swedish market 2016 or something like that. And again, as I'm not a part of, and actually I know people from the industry, but I've not worked with them in any way. And therefore I can't really say what they've done in their own contacts with government. But I know that the story about snus has, and the Swedish experience about snus is a pretty well-known story. And it's been, I would say that's been an organic learning process by politicians and government in Sweden. Mostly like me, everybody knows someone that actually used oral tobacco to quit smoking. If they didn't do it themselves, they know someone. And then, of course, I know that the industry and others have been aiding with statistics and telling the story. For example, I didn't have the statistics of the number of sold cans of snus. I pulled it from industry data, of course. And I know that they've done that. But right now, there is a big discussion, and has been a big discussion, about how to regulate these new products, the nicotine pouches. There is been a big discussion. And
Also in Sweden, yeah.
Also in Sweden. But there's never been a discussion focused. Nobody has even thought about the question about banning it. The question has been on marketing and taxes primarily. Taxes, it's fascinating. When there's a new product, you always get, excise duties and taxes, even before they decided whether it's legal or not. I get it's probably like the same here in Latvia, that it probably, first we tax it, then we ponder on whether we should ban it. So there's been a discussion about that, and age limits, because when it was introduced, there was no age limit. And that I know, even the industry thought was a very good idea. They had voluntary age limits, but to actually make it mandatory with age limits. So there is discussion, and there is new regulation that actually is proposed. And I think I don't know if it's just has been decided or will be decided after the election, but there is new regulation that is pretty uncontroversial. Industry has accepted it. There's no political debate around it, and that actually will keep it legal, keep tastes, not any real caps on nicotine levels, some regulation of marketing and age limits.
Thank you.
Thank you for the very interesting presentation. It's always great that I learned something from them, and I did, so thank you. I had a question about, first, the prices of snus compared to cigarettes. Are they similar? And second, about any correlations with poverty and snus and cigarette uses. Are there any kind of interesting trends there?
Now I'll do something dangerous. to some extent I'll speculate, which is actually, but I'm at least honest enough to mention it before I do it. But first, when it comes to prices, cigarettes are more expensive, but snus has high taxes, and then increased taxes on snus even more actually compared to, and the main reason for that, how illogical and counter the health perspective it might be, the main reason from the Ministry of Finance has been smuggling. Because cigarette smuggling is a huge thing. Just think about the whole Philip Morris case, and that was a couple of years ago around smuggling. And there is a huge problem with cigarette smuggling. If you increase taxes too much on cigarettes, you almost automatically can see the cigarette smuggling increase. But you don't have the exact same effect when it comes to snus, because it's banned in the rest of Europe, which means that you don't have as much inflow. That has led to, I think, an unnecessary increase of taxes. It's still, the difference is, I think it's on weight in one case and on number of cigarettes in the other somehow. I'm not an expert in the taxes, which means it's a little bit hard to compare, but I would say that it's probably still lower for snus than it is, but it's been increasing in a way that makes me concerned. When it comes to the question about social aspect, if you can find us, put a social raster on it and conclude something, there is a clear, historically, it was, I hate the word, but my English is not good enough, the lower classes or the more deprived that actually used snus. You would never see something like this in a boardroom. That was the case. I would say today that's the other way around. That if you find cigarettes, you definitely find the smoking among those with lower incomes and more deprived people. I don't. The reason I said I would speculate is because I don't have the number for this, but I feel convinced that's the case out of my own experience, but also because I think I've seen that somewhere, that statistics. But I think to some extent that also the whole, I put a lot of I give a lot of credit for this to that one engineer in 1973 that put it in pouches, because that's probably true. But I also think that we have a general health trend in society, eating healthier, and I tried to buy a sandwich with this mayonnaise tuna stuff in Stockholm, and it was impossible because there were only quinoa salads with avocado and beans in, and I wanted something, But so there's a general trend, and that trend is most clear among more educated, wealthier people. And that you can see also when it comes to the tobacco, that people, and also when it comes to nicotine pouches. When you come to a meeting in Stockholm, it's very often so that you see the first thing people do is they put their can on the table, the telephone on mute, and put up the computer. That's the normal thing to see.
Just briefly, yeah. Could you elaborate a little bit on the amount of nicotine? Because we are having here very fierce discussions regarding that, saying that, well, 20 milligrams, it's super huge amount, and so we have to stick to, say, 4. Mm.
The problem is, of course, that I'm not an expert in that field. Therefore, I stick to the question, it has to be effective. And that was my experience. I worked a lot on the TPD2, the current Tobacco Products Directive. And I must say that it was a huge success that e-cigarettes wasn't banned, which was the original intention by the Commission back then. But the compromise that was struck with this strict limit on nicotine in e-cigarettes was devastating for the possibility of Europe to actually use e-cigarettes. oral tobacco and nicotine pouches is fantastic, but okay, I'm a conservative, but President Mao was right, you know, let every flower bloom. It's not for everybody. So therefore, you need a multitude of different deliveries of it. And that was a huge mistake. The problem when setting nicotine levels is, of course, that there's so much different. It depends upon the acidity, it depends upon whether it's salts, how the nicotine. So therefore, getting the cap right, I'm worried about that. With that said, if I were a producer, and I've seen that, you know, not my wife, I live in Sin, but the mother of my children, all 4 of them are actually, she's from the islands of Åland. And when you go on the ferry, I can see, you know, things that if I would try it, I would almost pass out because they're, and you've heard, you know, there's been a nicotine race, and I've heard rumors about that in Norway, for example, the nicotine race. That makes me concerned. That again, industry repeats the same bloody mistake. Because the important thing is just to keep it effective, to make it a competitive alternative to cigarettes, to give you the kick. Because, you know, you do it because you enjoy it. If you take the enjoyment out of it, it'll die. So, in principle, I have no problem with a cap. But it's hard to set, and you should be very careful so you don't set it too low.
Thank you. Thank you very much for answering the questions and for the presentation. Thank you. Nākamais runātājs pieslēgsies tiešsaistē, un tas būs Ignacio González Sores, Philip Morris International zinātnes departamenta vadītājs. Un prezentācijas tēma – virzība uz bezdūmu sabiedrību. Tātad acu mirkli. Well, hello. Can you hear me?
Hello, I can hear you. Can you hear me and see me?
Yes, we hear and we see you, and now we would like to see the presentation as well.
Oh, okay. It's not showing. Let me try to share again.
Yeah. Now we can see the presentation and just, yeah, that's perfect. And now, yeah, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here. My name is Ignacio González. I'm the head of scientific engagement for Europe at PMI, and I'm very happy to be here. I just regret that I cannot be with you in person, but I hope that I have the opportunity in the future. I would also like to thank you, the organizers, for giving me the opportunity to give this talk. And what I would like to do today is to have a discussion around the question that you see on the screen, whether smoke-free products are an opportunity for public health. We know that smoking is a major risk factor for non-communicable diseases. It happens all over the world, and Latvia, it is not an exception. If you see the graph here on the left, this is data for the Global Burden of Disease database, showing the major risk factors for NCD-related mortality in Latvia in 1999. And you can see that smoking, it's right there at the top. What is surprising is that if you look at the data 20 years later, in 2019, smoking remains one of the top factors. Some others, like particulate matter pollution, had fell down in the scale, but smoking remains as a big factor. And this is despite any measures that have been put in place to reduce smoking prevalence and smoking-related harm. It was an issue in 1999. It is still an issue 20 years later. And if you look at smoking prevalence, in Latvia, it's around 24%. So essentially, 1 in 4 people in Latvia smoke. And if we take it to the whole world, there is around 1 billion people that smoke. And this is surprising because it's widely known that smoking increases the risk of disease, but still, most smokers continue to smoke. And the question that one can have at this point is what else can be done to try and reduce smoking prevalence, smoking-related harm. And this is where the concept of tobacco harm reduction comes into play as a complementary measure to prevention and cessation, which is basically the idea of providing information and access to alternative products so that those smokers who would otherwise continue to smoke can switch to something that is less harmful. Now, when you think about these alternative products, there are two main factors that one needs to consider for them. If we want to reduce the harm at the population level, we need two things. On one hand, we need products that are scientifically substantiated to be less harmful than continue to smoke. But it's also very important to consider acceptance. We also need products that are accepted by the smoker so that they can switch. Because no matter how good a product may be in terms of risk profile, if nobody uses them, then you're not going to achieve a reduction at the population level. And this is where things like the sensorial experience, the flavor, and the nicotine play a very important role in facilitating switching. When it comes to nicotine, there is a lot of misconceptions. Nicotine is very important from the point of view of acceptability. Now, the misconception comes because there's still a large number of smokers and ex-smokers that think that nicotine is the primary cause of smoke-related diseases. And when we look at the data, this is not the case. And experts and public health bodies, they agree that nicotine, while it is addictive and it's not without risk, it is not the primary cause of disease. The primary cause are the toxicants that are present in the smoke, the majority of which are generated when the tobacco in a cigarette is burned. This is the main cause of disease. So if we look at this, the problem is that in a cigarette, together with nicotine, the user is inhaling a lot of these toxicants. In fact, the problem is from how the product is being used. When you light a cigarette and you burn the tobacco, you generate the smoke, which is a very complex mixture that contains thousands of constituents. And around 100 of them have been identified by authorities and public health bodies as harmful or potentially harmful. And this is the primary cause of disease. So the idea behind smoke-free products, these products are designed not to burn tobacco, by eliminating combustion, reducing the levels of these toxicants. So it's a way to separate nicotine delivery from all the other chemicals that appear in cigarette smoke. Now, we also know that there's not going to be one single product that is going to be suitable for those smokers that don't quit, switch. It has to be a different array of products. So at PMI, we are working on a portfolio of different products, which you can see here. On one hand, we have products that contain tobacco, but the tobacco is heated and not burned. And I will focus on my presentation on the scientific evidence behind this one, the tobacco heating system. But we also have products that do not contain tobacco, but contain nicotine, whether it's e-vapor products, nicotine salt products, or oral nicotine products. So as you can see, different ways of delivering nicotine, but what these products have in common is that there is no combustion and no smoke is generated. So let's look now at the evidence for the tobacco heating system, focusing on the first term of this equation on reducing individual risk. Are this product less harmful than continue to smoke? Now, before I show you the data, it's also important to understand what is the framework of assessment. How can we assess if these products are actually better than continue smoking or not? So what we did is we looked at what we know from the epidemiology of smoking. This chart, which is only for illustration purposes, what shows you basically is that the longer you smoke, the higher the risk of developing smoke-related diseases. Epidemiology also tells us that if at some point the smoker stops smoking, the risk stops increasing and eventually decreases, because without a doubt, cessation is the best way to reduce the risk. So in this context, if we want to assess what happens when a smoker switches to a smoke-free product, we need to compare the effects of switching with the effects of continuing smoking, because this is the intended population, smokers that don't quit. But we also need to compare to cessation, because that's the gold standard. And what we would like to see is that the effects of switching are as close as possible to cessation and as far away from smoking as possible. And this is the framework that drives our scientific studies. Now, to give you an idea of how, by eliminating combustion, we can make a difference and a product that does not generate smoke, and I think an image is worth 1,000 words, this is what you see in this slide. To the left, what you see is cigarette smoke that has been collected in a Cambridge pad filter. You can see the decoloration, and this is caused by high levels of toxicants and also high levels of carbon-based solid particles, which are a hallmark of combustion and also problematic from a health perspective, because they accumulate in the lung and they are associated with respiratory and cardiovascular diseases. To the right, you see a filter where we have collected the aerosol that comes from the tobacco heating system. You see the difference in color. And when you look, and we will see this in more detail in the next slide, there is a significant reduction in the levels of toxicants compared to cigarette smoke. As I mentioned before, there is around 100 toxicants in the smoke of a cigarette that have been classified as harmful or potentially harmful chemicals. This comes from the most comprehensive list of toxicants from the US FDA. And we have measured the levels of those toxicants in the smoke of a reference cigarette and in our THS system. What you can see is that compared to cigarette smoke in gray, there is more than 90% reduction on average on the levels of toxicants in the THS system. Now, these toxicants can be classified according to the primary source of toxicity. You have carcinogens, cardiovascular toxicants, respiratory toxicants, and reproductive toxicants. But regardless of how you classify them, you see a very consistent profile. There is a significant reduction, 90 to 95% on the levels on average of toxicants in THS compared to cigarette smoke. Mind you, this is a reduction, it is not an elimination, so these products are not risk-free, but you see how by eliminating combustion, you can really reduce these levels of toxicants. Now, this represents emissions, in other words, what comes out of the product or of a cigarette. But what about exposure? What happens when a smoker switches to this product? So we have conducted an exhaustive clinical assessment program, and one of the things we looked at is at exposure. So we selected a population of adult smokers, and they were divided into 3 groups. One, they continue smoking for the duration of the studies, up to 90 days. Second group were asked to quit smoking for the duration of the study, and a third group were asked to switch to this product. And we measured in the blood and in the urine biomarkers of exposure to some of these toxicants that are present in the smoke. We measured 15 of them, and I'll show you all the data, but I would like to use one of these toxicants as an example to show you how a reduction in emissions translates into a reduction in exposure. And this is the case of carbon monoxide. On the graph to the left, you see the difference in the emissions, in the levels emitted of carbon monoxide in THS in blue compared to cigarette smoke. And you see there is more than 98% reduction in emissions. Now in the clinic, this translates to the following. What you see here is the levels of exposure to carbon monoxide. In gray, those that continue smoking, you see the levels remain high and constant throughout the study. In green, those in the cessation group, you see there's a rapid decrease and the levels of exposure to carbon monoxide remain low. In blue, those that switch, you may not see it very well because the curves are very similar, but you see also a rapid decline, a rapid decrease in exposure, and then the values remain low. In the next slide, if I'm trying to switch the slide, if I can, there you go. I am showing you the results of two different studies that we conducted, one in the US in the top panel, one in Japan in the bottom panel, with a combination of all the biomarkers of exposure that we measure. What you can see is that compared to the group that continues smoking, which is this dotted gray line, which is normalized to 100%, those that switch, the blue bars, show a significant decrease in exposure to toxicants for all those that we measure. And also importantly, the level of reduction is very similar to those in the cessation group, which are the green bars. In fact, when we look at the data all together, what we saw was that switching to THS achieves almost 95% of the reduction that is achieved by smoking abstinence. And please note that this abstinence group represents the maximum level of reduction in exposure that we can aspire to. Now, this data, together with a number of additional clinical and preclinical studies that we have done, and I don't have the time today to show you, in combination, what we call the totality of the evidence, they show that this product, THS, while not risk-free, it is a better option to continue smoking, which is very important, but it's not enough. If you remember this equation from the beginning, there is a second aspect, which is related to who is using the product. If we want to achieve population harm reduction, we need products that are accepted so that those smokers that don't quit can switch to this product. And at the same time, we want to prevent unintended use by non-smokers, ex-smokers, and of course the youth. So I would like to take the next few slides to focus on what do we know about this product when it comes to patterns of use. So one of the first questions we can ask is whether this product can actually help smokers move away from cigarettes. And the answer is yes. Here you see where the product is commercialized, and we have nowadays around 19 million users of the THS product, out of which around 70% have switched completely and move away from cigarettes. So this indicates that this is a product that is accepted, that it can help people to move away from cigarettes. And in fact, we're seeing the effects of heated tobacco products in countries like Japan. What you see here, if you focus on the gray line, this represents cigarette sales in Japan throughout the years. From 2011 to 2015, heated tobacco products were not available in the market, and you see a small decline on the years around 2–3%. After the introduction of heated tobacco products, you see that cigarette sales in Japan have declined at a much faster rate as the uptake of heated tobacco products increased. What is interesting, if we now look at the blue line here, this represents overall tobacco consumption. And you see that it follows the same trend as before. So essentially what this is telling us is that in Japan, heated tobacco products are effectively replacing cigarette without resulting in an overall increase in tobacco use. Again, very encouraging data. Now this is about cigarette sales. What about smoking prevalence? So to look at this, I'm showing you here, this is data from the National Health and Nutrition Survey, which is funded by the Japanese MOH, looking at use prevalence in Japan. The gray bars, these are before heated tobacco products were available in the country. Basically on the survey here is measuring cigarette use prevalence, and you see it remains constant around 19–20%. Between 2015 and 2017, heated tobacco products were available, but the survey was not really discriminating between the products. So what we're seeing here is essentially overall tobacco use prevalence, and you see it remains around 18%. Now, in 2019, the survey was updated to differentiate between the different products. And here's where you see differences. You see that if you take at the latest data, 2019, smoking prevalence has declined to 12%, compared to the 19% in 2014, as heated tobacco products has increased. So essentially what the data suggests is that the introduction of heated tobacco products is contributing to a decline in smoking prevalence in Japan. More recently, we have started looking at the relationship seen between the introduction of heated tobacco products in Japan and real-world health outcomes, such as the rate of hospitalizations caused by different smoke-related diseases, such as chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and ischemic heart disease. So what I'm showing you here, this is data from the Japan Medical Center database, which is an epidemiological receipt database with more than 7 million entries, where we looked at the rate of hospitalizations by these two diseases before and after the introduction of HTPs, of heated tobacco products. You see here, for example, in gray, before HTPs were available, this is the trend, the observed trend of hospitalizations. The dotted line would represent what would be expected based on the previous trend. However, since the introduction of HTPs, what we observe is a decline in hospitalizations by COPD, but also by ischemic heart disease, which is again very encouraging data. Now, very importantly on this part, what you see here is a temporal association. This data does not demonstrate a causal link between HTP use and a reduction in hospitalizations. Further studies would be necessary to demonstrate that causality, but still it is an encouraging trend and results that give us the energy or the facility to conduct additional studies. We also look in our own surveys of users of the products at who is using the product. And what we see in countries like Japan, but also Italy and Germany, is that the majority of users of the THS product, more than 97%, were actually already smoking cigarettes when they started to use the product. Excuse me. And there is very little effect on relapse and reinitiation by ex-smokers. So it seems the majority of the users are those for which the product is intended. Now, what about youth? We do not conduct studies in youth, but there is a number of independent studies where they looked at youth use of heated tobacco products coming from Japan, from Germany, or from Switzerland. And in all those cases, the prevalence of use by youth is very low. And in the conclusions of the papers, the authors point to that heated tobacco products are not an initiation product for minor or not a gateway to smoking. In addition, the US FDA, while they were doing the assessment for the THS system as part of the modified risk tobacco product application, they also reviewed the data and patterns of use from our company, but also externally. And what they concluded was that the available data, while limited, also indicate that few non-tobacco users would be likely to choose to start using the product THS, including youth. So if I go back to the title of my presentation, are smoke-free products a public health opportunity? Well, let's look at the conclusions. First of all, the totality of the evidence indicates to the direction that switching to THS completely, while not risk-free, is a better choice for adults who would otherwise continue smoking. The majority of users no longer smoke cigarettes. Non-smokers and ex-smokers rarely initiate or restart tobacco or nicotine use with the THS system. Almost every THS user has a history of tobacco or nicotine use, and published literature indicates a low prevalence of THS use in youth. We also see a decline of smoking prevalence that has accelerated in Japan since the introduction of heated tobacco products. And we also, for our THS system, we receive authorization from the US FDA to commercialize the product with reduced exposure claims. And in that decision, the agency considered that commercializing the product with such information is expected to promote public health. Obviously, it's very important to continue monitoring product use, and this will help avoiding unintended consequences. So these are the conclusions. Now, there's one last thing that I would like to point out, and is from a company perspective, our objective is clear. We want to help smokers to move away from cigarettes and essentially make cigarettes something obsolete, something of the past. We're doing everything that we can, but we cannot do it alone. Others have a role to play. So in the next few slides, I would like to comment on what other roles, in particularly when it comes to regulation and the potential role of governments. It is very important that these products, smoke-free products, are regulated. And it's also important that any regulation is informed by science. What you see here, this is a publication from last year, which is authored by a number of past presidents from the Society of Nicotine Research and Tobacco, where they did a consideration of the evidence, the risk and the benefits of e-cigarettes, as well as some policy recommendations. In their assessment, they agreed that these products, again, they're not risk-free, but they're less harmful than smoking, and they can help move people out of cigarette smoking. They also see that when you look at these products, you need to consider, on one hand, the potential benefits for smokers, and this is as important as protecting non-smokers from accessing to these products. And they conclude also that the impact of these products on public health would be much larger if the public health community paid attention to the potential of these products to help smokers. In other words, regulation can help accelerate and increase the benefits for public health of these products. And when we look at how regulation or regulatory framework can help, these are four very important pillars. These 4 A's: awareness, acceptability, availability, and affordability. It is important, first of all, that smokers have access to information that is accurate and not misleading so that they can make an informed decision. Because let's not forget the decision to either quit or to switch, it will come from the smoker. These products need to be also available. They need to be accepted so that it facilitates switching, and they also need to be affordable. And this is where taxing measures can help accelerate the switching. Obviously, it's very important to strive a balance between offering these products to smokers and protecting the non-smokers and preventing unintended use, which is why safeguards have to be put in place, and there needs to be continuous monitoring and continuous working on studies to track the progress and identify potential concerns. Now, the good thing is that there is a growing number of countries that are integrated or considering tobacco harm reduction approaches as part of the overall approach to reduce smoking prevalence and smoke-related harm. You have here just a few examples, such as the USA, in Greece, in Philippines, in Switzerland, where they introduce different aspects for assessing these products or for health claims, or establishing a differential regulatory framework between these products and cigarettes. And just to finalize, I think there are 2 very good examples of countries that have traditionally have a very restrictive approach to cigarettes, and in addition, have embraced the concept of tobacco harm reduction. The first one is obviously the UK. In the UK, smoking prevalence was declining progressively since the year 2000, but around 2017, the government realized that if they wanted to keep that momentum, it was not enough with traditional measures of prevention and cessation, so they looked into tobacco harm reduction. The Royal College of Physicians and Public Health England, they did an assessment of the evidence behind these products. They concluded that the cigarettes, for example, they're far less harmful, and that helped the government to take an approach where they actively encourage smokers that if they don't quit, they switch to cigarettes, to products that are less harmful, and they move away from cigarettes. So it's a very good example. Another one, and this is my last slide, would be New Zealand, which is also a country that has very restrictive measures when it comes to cigarettes. Initially, they took a restrictive approach and they banned e-cigarettes and heated tobacco products. But what they realized in 2017 was that if they wanted to achieve their goal of smoke-free in 2025, with traditional measures, this will not happen because they have higher smoking prevalence, particularly in the indigenous population. So they looked into the science behind tobacco harm reduction, and they changed the regulatory framework. They rescinded the ban on these products, and they concluded that these products and tobacco harm reduction can play a very active role on achieving the 2025 goal. This is obviously combined with the proposal for a smoke-free generation, where they will periodically increase the restrictions and the access to cigarettes on these products. But again, keeping the tobacco harm reduction arm for those smokers that are smoking and they don't quit. And that is all I have to say. So thank you very much for your attention, and I will be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and I would like to ask the audience if there's any question. Yeah.
Hello. Yes, I don't know, do you see me, or at least I hope you hear me. My name is Māris Juruš. I'm a researcher from Riga Technical University. Thank you for presentation, and my question will be about cigarillos, okay? And it's somehow also related with data what you show us regarding Japan. I mean, I noticed also in Japan, we can see that latest decade decrease amount of consumption of cigarettes, but also slowly increased some consumption of cigarillos. And we have the same absolutely situation here in Latvia. We can if we compare also here in Latvia the latest period, we can see that the increase of cigarillos somehow is growing, and I think it's one of the main reasons. Probably it's some availability of this product and popularity, because if we look back, there was no, let's say, even so popular, and even we could buy it like in like a package, but just maybe stick, and also there could be some reason, some price, and also some taxes. My question is there any kind of arguments why we could say, okay, also switching from cigarettes to cigarillos, it's also, let's say, somehow acceptable due to that it's maybe less harmful, or any other arguments? Or is it the same if we're talking about smoking, then we consider not only about smoking of cigarettes but also cigarillos? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So I would answer that question from a toxicological point of view, if you allow me. So as I mentioned, it is very clear that the primary cause of smoke-related diseases are the toxicants in the smoke, when you burn the tobacco. That happens in a cigarette, but that happens anytime or any product that burns the tobacco, and cigarillos, they definitely burn. So from that point of view, there's not much difference, in the sense that they're burning, you're generating smoke, and when you inhale, you're still inhaling all those toxicants. Now, it is true that toxicology is a matter of the dose. So we would need to see if, what is the consumption for a given user of the number of cigarettes versus the number of cigarillos, if that matches, if it's similar or not, which honestly, I don't know. But from a purely toxicological point of view, every time you're burning the tobacco, whether it's a cigarette or a cigarillo, you're inhaling. So my answer would be, the best is always to quit. But if you're not going to quit, switching to something, so a product that the science tells you is less harmful, which is not the case for cigarillos, it's a better option. Whether it's e-cigarettes, whether it's heated tobacco, whether it's oral tobacco, those are better products than smoking.
Thank you very much. Some more questions from the audience? No more questions. Thank you for your time, for your presentation, and being able to join us in this seminar. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Mūsu nākamais runātājs dalīsies pieredzē par nodokļu politiku Igaunijā un e-cigarešu regulēšanu. Tātad vārdu došu Ingmāram Kurkam. Ingmar, the floor is yours. Please share your experience from Estonia.
Hello, my name is Ingmar Kurk. I'm coming from Estonia. I'm representing a non-profit organization, NNA Smoke Free Estonia. We are all former smokers, and we believe that safer nicotine products should be available for adult smokers to quit or switch to safer products. I'm going to cover two topics today. First, little bit data, excise duty and sales volumes in Estonia. Then, what are the outcomes of Estonian e-liquids tax break that we had, and our key takeaways of e-cigarette regulations. The excise tax sizes are decided years ago that they will rise. So this year, cigarette excise tax, smoking tobacco, and solid tobacco substitute taxes will rise 1st of January next year. And next year also, we will have back the e-liquid tax that we have had 1.5 year break. Now, the amounts that are sold in Estonia. Cigarette sales are going down slowly, but still they are going down. With e-liquids, when they were taxed, we had correct information from finance ministry, and the sales went up slowly. At the moment, we don't have that data because there is no tax and nobody is collecting the information. But what's interesting is what has happened with solid tobacco substitute. This is nicotine pouches, basically. The sales of the nicotine pouches has gone up almost 6-fold in Estonia. Question why? For us, the reason is that since we are, in a way, communicating so much with Sweden, the conventional snus was in use in Estonia like 20 years ago already, and we probably had like 30 to 40,000 users, and then the snus was brought in from Sweden. And those people are now switching to legal products. Okay, what happened with e-liquid tax break? E-liquid prices fell, but we can't say that the amount they fall was the same that the tax size was, but they fall somewhat. And the tax break affected 33% of users. Why this percent is so small is that we have flavor ban. And that's the main reason why people are using different ways to get their e-liquids. So what happened with those 23%? For example, 9% gave up buying e-liquids on the black market, which is good. 8% gave up purchasing from other countries, and it probably includes online sales. This is not so good. Some started using e-cigarette more, but okay, perhaps they were smoking and was dual user and now is using more e-cigarettes, then it's good. And 5% gave up mixing e-liquids by themselves. Okay. But still, black and gray market still continues to drive, and the reason is flavor ban, and with the flavor ban and thanks to the disposables, we have now really problems in schools that wasn't there when the regulations were reasonable. So the flavor ban and the previous excise tax actually put the products in the young people's hands, youngsters' hands. So the government intentions was to keep away these products, but the result is opposite. So e-cigarette black market, we estimate that it's 62 to 80%. So if you look other areas in Estonia, alcohol, cigarettes, it's not that high. And the reason is that it's easy to get components. It's easy to get products from other EU countries. And so the results are not good. This experiment we had in Estonia is bad. Even vacation trips are planned based where you can buy flavored e-liquids, and South Estonians will visit Latvia. What is our concern as a consumers is safety. As long as these products are coming from Europe, and they are, we know that they are tested, then it's okay. But when they come outside of Europe, or people have to mix their e-liquids, then our question is why do we have an Europe regulation that requires that all e-liquids are tested? That regulation was done only to protect consumers. But if consumers have to mix flavors or buy products from black market, then we don't know what comes from there. And if the black market is so big, I think it's very big danger for consumers. Okay, this is, we have run a survey, 3 years, and these are the answers, how people buy e-liquids. The best should be that this should be 80 to 90%. So the e-liquids are tested, we know that they're good, they're safe to use. But instead, people buy nicotine liquid and their flavorings, or buy the components and mix everything together. So what the tax break did is that self-mixing went down a little bit. Perhaps disposable will have an effect also. Yes, so these columns should be moved that way for safety reasons, and it means that the regulations should be reasonable. It's over-regulated at the moment, in our opinion. I'm going back because I forgot something, I think. No. We also have a distance selling ban, so no online selling. What it means for a consumer perspective is also that if you're living in a rural area, in a countryside, you don't have e-cigarette shops, but you can get a pack of cigarettes in every gas station. So those people are not in a good position to switch to safer nicotine alternatives. White snus has changed it a little bit, but still. And the other problem is that those regulations are actually not working very well because our customs don't and can't check all the packages that are coming from Europe. So, yes, it isn't working at all. Now, we asked social ministry, actually our MPs asked social ministry how many e-liquids and disposable cigarettes are sold. I don't know how they get their data, but we were really surprised. 2021, 202 million disposable e-cigarettes were sold in Estonia. And we have a little bit more than a million adults. So it means that half a million half a million adults in Estonia used one disposable per day with this calculation. This is not normal. And they haven't given us the reason or source where they get this number. This is huge. We should have another unicorn, but we don't. So this number is, yes, weird. It growed like this. I don't know. How Estonian e-cigarette might look next year. Since the excise tax will come back, it will be €2 per 10 milliliter bottle, then we can probably expect that the black and grey market will grow all bigger again. How big, I don't know. Some people might give up e-cigarettes, but from the previous data, we know that if the tax came, then some people who were using e-cigarettes, I think it was 16%, went back to smoking. So, and that's bad. And buying from domestic stores probably will decrease also, and so on. Is there any hope? Yes, at the moment, the group of members of Estonian Parliament has again drafted a law, made a draft law, and they want to allow selection of flavored e-liquid flavors of e-liquids to be extended. It means that flavors like gummy bears and cookies and stuff like that, that's aimed for kids, are forbidden. So those flavors can be named differently and shouldn't exist at all because they are targeting youth, and that's not aim. Restore distance sales. Reasons why distance sales is online sale is not working, I explained with a previous slide. And would regulate tobacco-free snus in the same way as other less harmful products. We also have discussions of how high to set the nicotine limit, because there are products that are, how can I say, not with a conventional nicotine limit, and we should look Sweden with what are their averages and what they are doing, because they are probably smartest. And they also want to set, I think, they are talking about set the limit on 9. This is definitely too small. too low. Limit should be, in our opinion, somewhere to 20 to 30, but I would still wait what Sweden will do, because they know better. What we think how the regulation should look like. We also think that the most harmful products should be taxed the highest, and based on the risk, the safer products should be taxed less. So they have price advantage, and therefore people have incentive to quit smoking and use less harmful products. So based on the harm, and it creates economic intensive. That's it. And questions?
Thank you, Ingmar. Questions? Yeah.
Hello, my name is Madara. I'm from Philip Morris, and thanks for the very interesting presentation. I just wanted to clarify the data for disposable e-cigarettes that you got from your Ministry of Social Affairs. This large number, I mean, then technically would include only disposables, tobacco, and menthol flavored, because the rest of disposables are banned in Estonia, if I understood it correctly.
Yes, but we have had incidents when bigger wholesalers don't know the rules, and there has been flavored cigarettes, disposables sold legally. But yes, basically they should be only tobacco, menthol, or nothing. That's why this number looks even crazier, because most of the what I have seen disposables are flavored and are from black market. So I have no idea.
Thanks a lot for clarification.
Vēl kādi jautājumi? Thank you, Ingmar, for your presentation and for telling more details about the situation in our neighboring country, Estonia. Thank you. Paldies runātājiem, klausītājiem. Tagad starpbrīdis 10 minūtes. Paldies. Turpinām mūsu semināru. Ceru, ka arī tiešsaistes skatītāji ir atgriezušies pie ekrāniem. Turpinot mūsu darba kārtību, vēlos dot vārdu nākamajam runātājam, Džonam Dunnem, Lielbritānijas veipošanas nozares asociācijas ģenerāldirektoram, kas sniegs plašāku ieskatu elektronisko cigarešu nozarē Lielbritānijā un apskatīs arī tādus aktuālus jautājumus kā nelegālais tirgus un korporatīvā sociālā atbildība. John, now the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me. My name is John Dunn, Director General of the UK Vaping Industry Association, and we're going to take you through a brief presentation about what's happening in the UK market with regards to the market itself and also with regulations, and then we'll open it up to any questions that you have. So the UK VIA is the largest trade association for the UK, which is the second largest market in the world for electronic cigarettes. We were founded in 2016 and we represent the whole breadth of the industry from manufacturers, retailers, distributors and compliance specialists. And we've got over 92 members. We've grown significantly in the last 2 to 3 years. And we provide an important interface between the industry, government regulators and the media. Taking a look at the UK vaping market overall, we continue to be the second largest market, as I said, but we've got very light touch regulations, which have been developed by the UK government, which has really encouraged growth in our area. We don't have any extra taxes on vaping and products, which is really important. And even the local government associations have called for a reduction in the VAT rate to make it more affordable to people who are on lower incomes. And that would be a 5% VAT rate. Now, we've all gone through the last couple of years with the pandemic, but in the UK, it's starting to really rebound. Most vape shops are now adding new locations. And we've also seen a huge surge in the market for disposables. We've got roughly around about 6,500 different disposable products currently registered with the MHRA here. But we're starting to see an extensive illegal market existing for oversized devices. And then the conventional routes to market are starting to be a little challenged. And this is really around the availability of vaping products through different mechanisms like rapid delivery firms, for instance. But this is also causing issues, especially here in the UK, around youth access and age verification. So we take a look at how the market's developed. You'll see it's around about almost £1.2 billion, up 11% in 2022. And we've also seen a huge jump over the last year in adult vapors coming into the market. We're at around about 4.2 million, and that's an 8% increase versus 2021. Now, as we said, you know, vaping has rebounded from the valley of the lockdown turn down, and vaping's at an all-time high of 4.2 million. And UK smoking rates continue to drop well below the 13.8% for the first time since 2015. So I think we're doing something right. And the proportion of vapers who have never smoked remains really low at around 1.2%. Although I think we will see, and we are starting to see, an increase in youth uptake due to disposables. And the percentage of ex-smokers who have never vaped has risen from 12.3% in 2020, up from 11.7% in 2019, indicating that more smokers are successfully quitting with the good help that they're getting from vaping. Now, these figures also indicate that the anti-vaping lobbies really are not getting their message through, which is good for our industry. But if we take a look at youth vaping here in the UK, in 2022, for the first time, we saw the most frequently used devices by young people being disposables. And that's up from 52% versus 7.7% just last year. And a large majority of the 7 to 17-year-olds have never been vaping, have never tried vaping, which is really also really important. That's 83.8%. Now, regular use of e-cigarettes still remains very low among that 11 to 17-year-old. And in 2022, regular use was at 3.1% and occasional use at 3.9%. So most people, who have never smoked had also never vaped, which is 92%. And the most current youth vapers were either former or current smokers at 85.1%. So why is this data important? Frankly, if youth vaping numbers continue to increase, we feel that regulators will act, and the industry must take steps to self-regulate. Now, the sale of tobacco and e-cigarettes to people under the age of 18 is an offence in the UK. However, the most common ways to access both cigarettes and e-cigarettes amongst young people are purchasing them from shops, which is almost 52%. For buying cigarettes and 46.5% for buying e-cigarettes. And the most common source was being given them from friends or family, which is 39.3% for cigarettes, but 43% for e-cigarettes. Now, how we market our products is also very important. And the data in the UK shows that over half of the 11 to 17-year-olds were aware of e-cigarette promotion, 55.8%. And of those who reported seeing e-cigarettes online, the most common sources were TikTok and Instagram. Now, in my opinion, there is no reputable brand who should be advertising their products on TikTok. It is designed purely for young people and has a very, very low demographic. And this is one of the things that we're really concentrating here in the UK. Now, why is that important? The perception of the industry, is still a problem. 29% of current smokers believe that vaping is less harmful than smoking, but 38% believe that it was as harmful as smoking. Now, these are ridiculous numbers, but they're being fueled by the misinformation in the media, and this is something that we really need to turn around. Now, enforcement and compliance is very strong here in the UK. And the MHRA is taking a much harder stance on non-compliant products and companies falsifying submissions. Now, this has resulted in many products being refused approval or taking a long time to be approved. And the new system really allows the MHRA here to take a closer look at every submission. They're also seeking new powers to potentially see them cancelling ECID numbers if they suspect that a company has committed fraud and potentially ban repeat offenders from registering products at all. We think this is a great step. Now, further updates are underway and we'll see it becoming easier to check if a product is registered. Now, in Scotland, it's slightly different, but they're also taking a very proactive stance. And they've removed 88,000 non-compliant disposables during this period. Now, word of caution. The UK VIA investigation found that many disposable brands in the UK market at the current time are non-compliant, and that's for various reasons. But the main two reasons are tank sizes that are above the legal limit of 2 mLs, which is the same in Europe, and a nicotine strength above the 20 milligram max. But we're also seeing some packaging issues coming up as well. Now, we've really taken a proactive stance because we understand how important it is to our market. And we think that other markets should be doing the exact same. Now, we work very closely with the MHRA, with our local authorities here called Trading Standards, who enforce the regulations, and law enforcement to identify illegal sellers. We're helping raid shops and wholesalers where they confiscate illegal products and fine the shops. Now, the UK VIA has been working with many of our partners also in China to shut down counterfeit operations, which really is becoming an issue here. And we're also seeing enforcement of the age of sale regulations. But we really think this needs to be improved. And one of the issues we have here is funding in the UK. The other issue we have is that fines for these type of offences are very low. And the UK VIA is calling for the government to change these fines to a minimum of £10,000 per instance for selling illegal vaping products or to sell to minors. And this goes for both retail operations and for wholesale as well. And we really think this will go a long way to addressing the situation. One of the other things that we're trying to do is really raise awareness in our local market. And we started a vaping awareness month now that has gone globally called Vapril. And we launched that back in 2018. And in 2022, we saw over 6 million people worldwide engage with this program. So this is something that we'd encourage other countries to take up, and we'll be doing it again in 2023. We're also working very closely with our hospitals and our NHS here, because we understand that many people go to doctors to get information about vaping, and they are a great tool for us to try and convert many of the smokers who still haven't converted to vaping. So that's what's happening in our market. And if you have any questions, I will be glad to take them.
Thank you for the presentation, and I expect some questions from the audience. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, thank you for presentation. I would like to ask you some questions about this illicit market. Well, if we look to here in Latvia, the main factors for illicit market are purchasing power and, of course, high tax border. May I ask you, what are the main factors for illicit trade in UK? As you mentioned, there is no taxes in so sensitive. In your cases, what are the factors and what's the opinion how to, let's say, to fight with it and limit some illicit trade? And maybe you have some suggestions also for us. Thank you.
Absolutely. You know, although we have low taxes here, there is still a huge black market, especially in devices that are larger than are legally allowed. And this is where we're seeing most of the issues. There are also some companies that are not following the rules by registering their products, or they're bringing them onto the market before they're authorized. So these are the main things we see for the black market. The biggest thing for us really is we are very fortunate to have a government that understands that having high taxes and trying to replace tobacco revenue from the sale of e-cigarettes is the wrong track to take. And this is the main reason, and the main driver for that is the UK government is responsible for and pays for the healthcare of all of its citizens. So it understands that if we have a healthier nation and more smokers switching to vaping, that in the long run, the cost savings to the health and the productivity of workers will far outweigh the revenue that they would raise from taxes. And this, I think, is a great argument to take with governments around the world, rather than looking at it purely from a fiscal standpoint. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Yeah, one more question.
Thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. I have 2 questions. The first one is in regards to the increase in youth use of disposable products. Do you know what is happening at the same time with their use of cigarettes? Is it kind of displacing towards the disposable products?
No, actually, it's not. So we continue to see youth smoking numbers declining. But where we're seeing the growth in youth uptake is in the trial. So it's in not in regular use, but in occasional use. And even the government and the agencies that are monitoring this very closely feel that is just normal teenage trial. However, the fact that it's grown so quickly over the last year is something that everybody is really paying close attention to. And I put that down to some rogue traders who are trying to profiteer on the popularity. I also put it down to the abundance of content on social media sites that are really used by young people. And this is one of the things that we're trying to encourage our industry to move away from these things.
Yeah, thank you. And then the other questions about the advertisement. As we know, it's all of these kind of alternative, especially disposable products, we see a lot on the social media, like you said, TikTok and Instagram. How do you imagine tackling it when it is not the companies creating the advertisements, but more maybe influencers who are kind of doing it and are not paid to advertise these products? It's just part of their lifestyle.
Absolutely, but the owners of these sites, have the ability to censor this type of content. So one of the things that we're working on here is actually speaking with the brand owners themselves, obviously in China, and we're really doing a lot of work with Elf Bar and Geek Bar, for instance, and you'll see a new social media charter coming out from both companies here very soon. My understanding is they are going to pull back from the use of many of these social media sites as a company, but they will be also writing to the social media sites themselves, requesting that all content for their brands be removed, whether it's from social media influencers or personal people posting content. And I think this hopefully will have an effect, but we'll have to wait and see what the companies actually do themselves.
Cool, that's very interesting. Yeah, I can see that actually working. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Some more questions? Seems that no questions for now. Thank you very much for your presentation and for provided replies. And thank you for being able to join us here.
No problem. I hope you have a great conference day.
Yeah, thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you.
Jā, turpinājumā par nozares sociālo atbildību Latvijā, par iniciatīvām un paveikto dodu vārdu Mārim Sprogam, BNA valdes priekšsēdētājiem.
Precizēšu turpinājumā un noslēgumā. Jā, man bija uzdevums pastāstīt par nozaru sociālo atbildību, kas ir par ap un pret kvēpļiem. Un tad es pats liekot vakar kopā prezentāciju, domāju, kas tad tas kvēplis varētu būt, var būt. Ja. Pirmā asociācija, viennozīmīgi. Ja. Tātad indivīds, kas pārvietojas ar 20 gadus vecu premium automašīnu, tikko no Vācijas un pēc tuninga vietējās tuninga firmās. Ja. Otrs variants šodien, kad sēdē minūtes 40 sastrēgumā uz Mūkas salas ielas, pavisam noteikti šāds. Ja. Un tad braucu un tiešām braucu priecīgs, optimistisks uz bezdūma nozares konferenci. Un tu domā, kas notiek? Tad attālināt nevar strādāt, vai kur viņi visi brauc? Un galu beigās, krīze ir vai nav? Laikam vēl nav, bet tas ir no šī te man tāda pesimistiskā realisma skatoties. Otrs variants, skatoties optimistiskāk, ir šāds. Kvēplis. Ja, cilvēks, kas dara labu, svētīgu sabiedrībai un mājas īpašniekam un arī pats sev darbu. Skursteņslauķis, laimes nesējs. Tomēr, kvēplis ir šāds. Kvēplis ir šāds, krāsains, nezināms, un es pat nezinu, kas zem tā slēpjās. Lūk, mūsu kampaņa saucās Atmasko kvēpli, kas ir faktiski būvēta tādās 3 stadijās. 1., 2. un 3. 3. būs jau šodien vai rītā. Kādēļ? Protams, kā mēs to visi zinām, ka likums ir kāds viņš ir, bet viņš realitātē tiek pārkāpts. Nav noslēpums, ka gan kafejnīcas, gan koncerti, gan šeit pēdējais bija, kur es saņēmu dažādas arī ekrānu šāviņas no Prāta vētras koncerta meža parkā pēdējā, kur cilvēki laipni un priecīgi lietoja vienreizējās e-cigaretes. Protams, ka tas arī skolas, ja, tātad, kas faktiski ir aktīva tāda tusiņu tirniecības vieta. Mēs kā nozare, vismaz bezdūmu nozares asociācija, protams, saprotam, ka tas nav pieļaujams ne no morālā, ne likumiskā viedokļa, bet tas met arī ēnu uz nozari kā tādu, ko mēs noteikti nevēlamies. Lūk, pirmais posms, ko mēs sākām pagājušā gada oktobrī, sastāvēja no tātad trīs punktiem. Pirmais labās prakses memorands, kurā asociācijas biedri un tika aicināti arī citu uzņēmumi vienojās par kaut kādu labus prakses tirdzniecības kodu. Otrs - tirgotāja izglītošana, un trešais ir sabiedrības iesaiste. Jā, ir atsevišķa mājaslapa Kvaping.lv, kur arī tas viss ir atrodams, un kur var gan memorandu lejuplādēt PDF formātā, gan arī tam pievienoties. Šobrīd ir bezdūmu nozares asociācijas biedri. Jā, ir bijusi interese arī no citiem uzņēmumiem, bet, nezinām, iemeslu dēļ tā nav kaut kā materializējusies ar memoranda attiecīgi parakstīšanu. Jā, ir aicinājums tirgotājiem. Mēs sagatavojām uzlīmes tirniecības vietām ar šādu tekstu. Un trešais, protams, ir aicinājums populāri ziņot. Gan patērētāja tiesība aizsardzības centram, gan valsts ieņēmumu dienestam, gan valsts policijai. Kā tur gāja, es nezinu, bet es sapratu vismaz no valsts ieņēmumu dienesta, ka pieaugums ir bijis. Ja, tā tad ir bijuši ziņojumi, informācija, un tālāk jau droši vien viss tiek galā. Lūk. Otrs posms, ko mēs sākām šī gada maijā, bija izglītošana, un tas notika sadarbībā ar māmiņu klubu un māmām un tētiem portālu. Te mums ir Marita, kas sniedz interviju, tāpat arī izglītības ministru, to laikam tagad vēlēšana dēļ nevar rādīt, bet arī psihologi kā Krišjāns Zaremba un citi. Un trešais, ko mēs sāksim šodien vai rīt, ir tieši tas, ir viedokļa līderi, ietekmeļi vai influenceri, kas ir vērts uz tieši lietotājiem, diemžēl. Gan Instagramā, gan attiecīgi, protams, TikTokā. Piesaistījām sabiedrībā pazīstamus cilvēkus. Es varbūt neesmu mērķa auditorijas, nepateikšu, kas tie. Tas man šķiet, ka tas ir DJs Gustavito. Jā. Un fitness coach, mamma Nika Linda, un, protams, arī šādi jaunieši, kas ir vēl ar mēķi tieši uzrunāt jauniešus, nepilngadīgos, jo tagad tas jauniešu termīns saskaņā ar tiem jaunatnes likuma grozījumiem ir tā, ka ir no 13 līdz 30 gadiem ir jaunietis, man šķiet. Tā kā nepilngadīgi jaunieši, tā kā par tiem iet stāsts, un ko mēs arī tad attiecīgi uzrunāsim ar mūsu šādu te kampaņu. Kaut kā, jā. Līdz ar to, jā, risinājumi, kādas esam arī komunicējuši mūsu saziņā, protams, ir soda apjoma pārskatīšana. Mans personīgais viedoklis ir tas, ka pārskatīt, protams, tos var, bet svarīgākais ir tos ievērot. Un ar to, protams, arī nevienmēr ir tā, kā ir, un ar attiecīgi tiesību sargājošo iestāžu darba. Ja. Pircēju vecuma kontroli, un, protams, kā jau mēs dzirdējām no citām prezentācijām, produktu pievilcība. Pilnīgi noteikti. Atraktīvās garšas, smaržas, visādas reklāmas un tam līdzīgas. Tas ir nepiedodami, un tas ir jāmaina. Un brīvais laiks. Ja, tas ir jauniešu iesaist aktivitātēs un hobijos. Lūk, līdz ar to nestresojam sastrēgumos, mīlēsim skursteņus lauķus un atmaskojam kvēpli. Man viss. Paldies. Jā, ko tur?
Paldies, Mārim. Varbūt ir kādi jautājumi par šo vizuālu atraktīvo prezentāciju un akciju kā tādu. Jautājumu nav. Paldies Mārim, paldies visiem runātājiem, paldies klausītājiem un skatītājiem par aktīvu līdzdalību. Līdz ar to mūsu šodienas seminārs ir noslēdzies. Domāju, ka ļoti daudz vērtīgas atziņas, interesanti piemēri no citām valstīm raisīs pārdomas un noteikti būs nākamais solis mūsu mērķī uz sabiedrību, kas ir brīva no tabakas dūmiem. Paldies visiem!